Welcome to Crossroads. A new shift was declared in global alliances. And with it, the Chinese Communist Party is right now pushing for a new global order under its control, and what they call the multipolar world order. Now, the push for this new international power structure actually came to the forefront just recently after a meeting between CCP leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This was during a gathering of leaders from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, they aim to create an alternative global security and economic alliance, along with a new push again for what they're calling the multipolar world, where the United States notably would no longer be the world leader. You'd have a shared system of global governance, notably with the Chinese Communist Party as the new leader of it. Barron's notes this: the leaders of China and Russia on Thursday urged their allies and partners to resist malign and external influence, advancing their shared anti-Western agenda at a regional summit in Central Asia. And notes that Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping were in the Kazakh capital of Astana for a gathering of leaders from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. And they know that's a regional bloc that Moscow and Beijing see as a counterweight to U.S. hegemony on the world stage, meaning the U.S. is the world leader. They see it as a challenge to that. They say that Xi Jinping called on the countries in this meeting to, quote, resist external interference, which I'll explain, while Putin claimed new centers of political and economic might were on the rise. It notes as well that in a joint declaration published by the Kremlin, again Russia, the group noted tectonic shifts in global politics and called for the bloc to play an enhanced role in global and regional security. They want to create a global security force. And they said this: the use of force is increasing, the norms of international law are systematically being violated, geopolitical confrontations and conflicts are growing, and risks to stability in the world and the SCO region are multiplying, it stated. It notes it did not refer to Russia's invasion of Ukraine or China's dispute with Taiwan, but said the group had, quote, mutual respect for sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of states. Now look, that seems to be the big reveal from this meeting. The Chinese Communist Party and its allies within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, while they sound like they're planning to get involved in so-called security operations, almost like a NATO force or a global peacekeeping force, but for communism, and of course with the Chinese Communist Party at the helm of it. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization was established by the CCP in Russia back in 2001. Now, it includes close allies to the CCP, as well as a few countries that are less close to China, but have closer ties to Russia, like India, for example. The main members of this are China, Russia, Iran, India, Pakistan, now Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. It also has dialogue partners throughout Asia and the Arab world, and also Eastern Europe, right? It's the former Soviet bloc, essentially. It also has relations with the United Nations, the African Union, and some other international organizations. They're trying to become one of the main power structures in the world. Now, on the point of these new security operations, it's important to understand the deeper implications of the phrases and words they're using, because the things they say on the surface don't always reflect what they actually, again, seem like. When they talk about, for example, mutual respect for sovereignty, I think most people would say, yeah, you should respect sovereignty. But for the CCP, this has loaded meanings. It refers to the many territorial claims of the Chinese Communist Party, and also, for example, countries criticizing the CCP's human rights abuses. They again claim that they have sovereignty, and that other countries shouldn't be able to criticize the CCP for using Muslims for slave labor, or harvesting the organs of Falun Gong practitioners, or tearing down churches, and so on. Right? They say that if you criticize it, you're undermining the sovereignty of the Chinese Communist Party. When they talk about independence, that also has to do with pressure from the United States and other countries against the CCP's ambitions to seize Taiwan by force. And it's also tied to the CCP's new programs aiming for independence in technology, food, and other things like that. The Chinese Communist Party, in other words, is trying to create a global power structure that does not have the United States involved. And they don't want countries criticizing that, stepping in to block it, or anything of that sort. Also, when they talk about the goal of resisting external interference, which is one of the phrases they're using, and the claim that new centers of political and economic might are on the rise. And when they talk about, as well, becoming the counterweight to so-called U.S. hegemony, all of these have very deep implications because they appear to be references to the Pax Americana, the peace under America, the system of the United States and what it represents for the world. The last, close to 100 years, at least after World War II, the United States has become the de facto world leader. And as part of that, with the U.S. at the helm, that has represented basically the American ideas of human rights and global influence and free markets, which have, of course, created a lot of what the modern world is. The peace under America is the idea as well of the American concept of government and the rights of civilians, the idea that we have God-given rights and the role of government is to protect those. And if countries violate those, the U.S. system of global governance means that the United States will place sanctions on countries, again, when they abuse the human rights of their citizens. The Chinese Communist Party is trying to create what they call the Pax Sinica, the peace under China. And as part of that system, they don't recognize human rights. They don't recognize, free markets. They don't recognize any of these things. The motto of the Chinese Communist Party is instead, state sovereignty and not interfering with internal policies and so on. They believe that you can do what you will, do whatever you want, and it's fine as long as you don't criticize other countries for doing whatever they want. It is a system of government, in other words, devoid of human rights. And of course, representing totalitarian social controls, surveillance, and the whole 9 yards. There's more to this as well. Vladimir Putin stated this. He said, the multipolar world has become a reality. Now, that statement on the multipolar world order has deeper implications as well. This is one of the big themes of this conference, in fact. This is a reference to ending what is called the unipolar world order. And again, these are loaded terms. What does the unipolar world order refer to? Well, that means the one system of government under the United States. The idea that you have a world order led by one power, the United States of America. That one power, unipolar, right, again refers to the U.S. And so if they talk about ending the unipolar world order, what they mean is ending what the United States represents to the world. And when they talk about creating a multipolar world order, what they mean is this. They believe in creating a new world order with the Chinese Communist Party's system of government, the China model, representing the new global power structure, but with a system globally of what they call shared global governance. It's very much like a Marxist revolution, but on a world stage. This is, again, really a revival of what we saw during the Cold War, the world communist revolution being spearheaded right now by the Chinese Communist Party through this Shanghai organization. Now also, it seems to represent a fairly significant development in an alliance with these countries as well. CCP leader Xi Jinping met with the other leaders of Turkey, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, and Mongolia. Notably, he did not meet with Indian Prime Minister Modi, though. And this is because of the backdrop of growing tensions between China and India right now. Indian Prime Minister Modi instead sent his foreign minister to the meeting. He didn't go. But on the note of the situation with India, Russia has closer ties with India, even though the CCP does not. And so given that Russia also plays a leading role within this Shanghai organization, instead of having the CCP play that role, Putin played that role. And just this week, in fact, Putin met with Modi in Moscow. This seems to play into older alliances. India and China, historically, they've had tensions even during the Cold War. India, though, maintained fairly close ties with Russia. And so Russia was always kind of the go-to within that alliance between those countries. In other words, it seems like the CCP is making efforts, though, to secure trade operations and security operations, and try to make sure that the agreements they've come to, the new world order they're trying to create, that this is something being accepted by other countries within the Eurasian region. Now, it appears that the extra steps are being taken as well to get all these members on board with this agenda. Also, one of the new members to this organization has some pretty deep importance. CNN noted this: a club of Eurasian countries spearheaded by China and Russia to advance their leaders' vision of an alternative world order is set to expand again this week. They say this time adding a staunch Russian ally that has openly supported Moscow's war on Ukraine. The expected admission of Belarus, which they did join since then, to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization at its annual Leaders Summit in Astana, Kazakhstan, is another push by Beijing and Moscow to transform the grouping from a regional security bloc into a geopolitical counterweight to Western institutions led by the United States and its allies. It notes that Belarus, which helped Russia to launch its 2022 invasion of Ukraine, will become the latest authoritarian state to join the club, after Iran became a full member last year. Now, Belarus is important mainly in the context of Russia's military ambitions. The ambitions that the CCP is actually now backing. This includes Ukraine, but there are concerns it could also extend beyond Ukraine to other countries. The concern, of course, is that the Soviet Union is trying to come back. Russia's trying to revive it. And so they're going to all the former Soviet bloc countries. In particular, there are concerns that Russia may have its eyes on Poland next. And this is also why Belarus is considered so important. It's on the border with Poland. And Russia has been growing its military presence there as well. Just last year, you might remember, Russia and Belarus were expanding their joint military drills. And this year, something else took place, just recently, in fact. The Chinese Communist Party right now is holding military drills with Belarus. Politico noted that Chinese and Belarusian troops started joint military exercises on Monday near the Belarusian city of Brest, 5 kilometers from the Polish border. The maneuvers, codenamed Eagle Assault, will last 11 days until July 19th. It notes the drills are a response to the, quote, West's aggressive foreign policy towards Belarus and to, quote, Ukrainian provocation, said the deputy head of the general staff of the Belarus Armed Forces at a Friday press briefing. It notes as well the exercises kick off on the eve of the July 9 to 11 NATO summit in Washington. The gathering, it says, will focus on aid to Ukraine, defense production, and defense budget targets. Meaning it seems to be, again, in reference of Russia's war in Ukraine and the possibility of that expanding war, and also U.S. and Western pressure to maybe make a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, as the CCP is trying to push an alternative peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, but on the terms of the Chinese Communist Party. Now look, in terms of the overall ambitions to challenge U.S. global influence and frankly eventually topple the United States as the world leader, and the goal for the CCP to replace the U.S. in that role, the big key word is the creation of the multipolar world order. And this is something really significant. I'll be talking more about the Chinese Communist Party's goals after we get back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party right now is trying to create new global power structures around a so-called multipolar world order. And with this as well, the United States, under that vision, would no longer be the world's main superpower. The United States would be toppled from that role. Now, in terms of the Chinese Communist Party's overall ambitions to challenge U.S. global influence and, again, to topple the U.S. as the world leader, the goal of the CCP to replace the U.S. in that role, the big keyword, again, is the creation of the multipolar world order. And it seems to be a big part of this, really, for the CCP. A big part is a Maoist-type strategy. What did Mao Zedong do? How did he start the revolution in China? How did he topple, again, the dynastic system of China and replace it with Chinese communism? Well, he had a strategy of uniting so-called minorities into violent revolution, to make them demand equal representation, to say that just like, again, Karl Marx talked about the idea of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, that there was unequal distribution of wealth. Mao Zedong talked about the unequal distribution of power. And when Xi Jinping is pushing this new global communist strategy, he's going to different nations and feeding them this narrative. In this case, equity and shared global power. He's saying that every country should have an equal seat at the world table. And these are now being referred to as the middle powers, these rising countries and so on. Nikkei Asia said this: of the 193 countries in the world today, around 24 qualify as middle powers. Some are in the global north, but the majority are in the global south. While all the middle powers of the north are committed to military pacts, most middle powers in the global south are non-aligned and tend to pursue strategic hedging. Collectively, it says, these middle powers have become a big factor in the global power shift. While Western nations are beginning to de-risk from China and Russia, pulling businesses out, and as the space for dialogue between them shrinks, middle powers, it said, of the global south are forming unprecedented economic, diplomatic, and strategic links with one another. And again, the CCP is trying to take advantage of that. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party has heavy operations catering to South America, to Africa, the southern regions, also to the Middle East, as we're seeing with this Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as well as parts of Asia and also other countries. And a big part of this is through things like the Belt and Road Initiative and other trade agreements, which are also accompanied notably by soft power pushes. If you take the bait, you get the trap, right? The CCP is using debt traps. They're offering countries infrastructure projects. They accept them. The CCP puts in not just the infrastructure, but it manages it. It gains partial control over it. And in exchange, the country gets into debt traps. They become almost like proxy states of the CCP. They become puppet states sometimes if the CCP can influence them deeply enough with soft power. And so through this, the Chinese Communist Party is extending its reach into South America, into Africa, into the Middle East and these other regions. And this is the strategy they're using. Now, again, you can't just have a power structure push. You can't just push security and so on. There needs to be a narrative. And for the Chinese Communist Party, part of this is the new Marxist revolution. They're pushing Xi Jinping thought. They're pushing this new global communist system. But also they're criticizing the United States. They're coming up with new narratives to tear down the image of the United States. This has been one of the key tactics of the CCP's operations to undermine the U.S. and what it represents. This is the war of words. Now, for the CCP also, this is war. They regard this as war. In fact, adopted into the Chinese Communist Party's own military doctrine is what they call the three warfares. What are those? Well, the three warfares are psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare. Legal warfare is a manipulation of international legal systems, challenging, for example, criticisms against the CCP or territorial claims or things for business warfare and otherwise. They will sue you for everything they possibly can. Media warfare means controlling all outlets of information. They want to make sure that no narratives that harm the CCP are able to be presented, and any ones that do present the CCP's ideas are promoted. But psychological warfare is the big one. Psychological warfare is not necessarily false information. Psychological warfare is creating the interpretation of the information presented to you, with the goal that you and I could look at the exact same picture, we could look at the exact same news article, we could look at the exact same things unfolding on the world, and our interpretations of them will be radically different. This is the war of narratives, the war of how you perceive the world around you. And for the CCP, this is war. It's part of their three warfares doctrine. And we see the CCP notably pushing narratives on this front very heavily right now. Chinese state-influenced media, South China Morning Post, said this. They said China's young people should avoid, quote, wishful thinking about the United States. And this is according to the country's former ambassador to the U.S. Remember, if the CCP promotes something, if they publish something, usually it's for a reason. Nothing gets said without the nod of the CCP. And this is the narrative. This former ambassador said blindly worshiping the U.S. is not a scientific or objective understanding. On the other hand, believing that the U.S. will inevitably decline and fall into ruin is also a one-sided and absolute view, inconsistent with reality and objectiveness. Now, this individual's remarks echoed, it said, some of those of observers who have called for an objective assessment of China's geopolitical challenges and strengths, the formula that the, quote, East is rising and the West is declining. They're noting that has gained traction among government officials and state-controlled media. This is the narrative. Now, importantly, under the Chinese Communist Party, this has other meanings as well. The idea of the West is declining and the East is rising, this ties into one of the regime's main slogans, which is, we live, you die. They believe the Chinese Communist Party cannot coexist with the United States on the world stage. They believe that for China to so-called rise, they need to destroy the United States. They say you can't have two tigers on one mountain, one tiger. And of course, right now, the United States is the tiger on that mountain. If the CCP is going to become the tiger on that mountain, they need to kill the other one. And take that in context, again, of the new security push and the new narratives of the emerging CCP-led world order. The idea of creating the multipolar world order, again, while destroying the unipolar world order. This is the reference. Back to the narrative war, though. It also applies to the ideas, the foundations of the US-led world order, the battle over ideology, including on issues like human rights. The Chinese Communist Party is trying to overtake all of this as well. But I'll be talking about all of this exclusively on EpochTV.com, the uncensored streaming platform of the Epoch Times. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, there's a link in the description below. You can click on that and get access to the rest of this episode. And not only will you get access to the rest of my library of shows, but also our family-friendly movies, premium investigative reports, hard-hitting documentaries, and things on issues that I think really matter to this country, like the Chinese Communist Party's 100-year plan to defeat the United States. I exposed this in my documentary, The Final War. The CCP is one of the biggest threats to this country. It's playing the long game against us by infiltrating and subverting the systems that underpin our country. And the CCP's unrestricted war against our country is also one of the scariest but least understood issues of our time. Now, I've spent over a decade investigating the CCP's subversion, and frankly, it's such an important issue that I've dedicated my career to warning people about the threat of the CCP. If you'd like to find out more about what's actually taking place right now and the CCP's plots against America, watch the Final War documentary. You can find the link in the description below, and I'll show you all the trailer before we go exclusively to EpochTV.com for the rest of this episode. I'll see you there.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.